I remember the executive stating, okay, Eric, we're never going to have a breach. We're going to be secure, protected, locked down, and never have a breach. And I immediately said, sir, that's not how we're going to keep score. I said, if that's how you're going to keep score, then I'm not the right person for the job. Welcome to Life of a CISO. I'm Dr. Eric Cole, your host, and we'll be taking you on a journey each week on what it takes to be a CISO and what are solutions that you can implement today if you are currently a Chief Information Security Officer or if you want to be one in the future. This is Life of a CISO. Welcome to this week's edition of Life of a CISO with yours truly, Dr. Eric Cole. It's always a pleasure to share with you tips and tricks to be a Chief Information Security Officer and take your life, your career, and your business to the next level. In the first few episodes, we were much more strategic and talked specifically about what exactly a CISO does and how to be successful. What I'd like to do in this episode is give you more of the mindset. What is the mindset that's needed to be successful in business? What's the mindset that's needed in order to be a Chief Information Security Officer for a small, medium, or large size organization? And the way I want to do that is by taking you through my journey. Because if you look at my journey, there was a lot of key decisions that I made, some consciously, some unconsciously, that I really want to help you put together that playbook of what is that right mindset you need to be successful. Because let's face it, you could be the smartest, brightest person on the planet, but if you don't believe in yourself, if you don't think that you can do it, and you're always sitting there talking down, saying bad things, I never could be successful, I never could be a CISO, or you say things like, my boss always hates me, my CEO never listens to me, nobody ever respects me in the organization, what do you think is going to happen? Right? You are an exact results of your words. So this one, I want to get a little more into the behavioral mindset of a CISO and what it takes to be successful. So I'm going to take you all the way back to 1984, right? Woohoo, right? Good old times, right? We're listening to some good bands like Bon Jovi, right? And Whitesnake and Guns N' Roses, right? Good times, good times. And we're going through all that great music. Well, I was in high school and I was looking at what career I wanted to pursue. And I always had a passion for architecture. Even today, I'm fascinated of buildings and bridges and how they actually stand. I mean, if you're in New York City or California, I mean, did you ever look at one of those buildings or the Golden Gate Bridge or the Brooklyn Bridge? Those are pretty amazing things. The fact that we could design such a thing to withstand storms and earthquakes and other factors, to me, it's just downright amazing. But while that was sort of my passion, it wasn't my true gift. And that's the first big lesson. In life, people have a lot of passions. There's a lot of things you're going to be passionate about. There's a lot of things that you're going to like. But what you need to do is find your real calling. What is your actual gift? What makes you unique? And what is the reason you're put on this planet? And to me, that's one of the reasons why when kids go off to college, if they don't really know their true calling or their true gift, that's why they switch majors, because they think they want to be an architect, but they have a bad teacher. And they get disingenuous and the passion burns out, but they take a psychology course with one of the best teachers at the college. And they get so excited. They're now passionate about that topic because that's what a great teacher can do. And now they want to be a psychologist. The problem is, what happens next semester when they get a teacher that's not so good, right? The passion burns out, and that's the switching majors over and over again. But fortunately, and I didn't realize it, I had a really good friend that was a really good advisor, and he sat down with me and he said, Eric, everything is going to computers. Why don't you major in computer science, and then you can do anything you want? Because if you know computers, and you know how to operate computers and program computers, you could still be an architect, or you can be an accountant, or you could be a programmer, or you could really be anybody you want because the computers are going to be the systems of the future. So I took his advice. Next data point in life, always have trusted advisors. Do you realize Bill Gates has advisors? Steve Jobs, when he was alive, has advisors. Elon Musk, he doesn't always listen to him, but he's got advisors. The president of the United States has advisors, right? So that's the other thing that I find is really smart people sometimes want to do it alone. They want to be a team of one, and they don't want to get help from others. But other people who have been there, done that, and see life through a different lens than you can definitely help you get perspective. Now, you don't have to listen to everybody, but to be a CISO, you're going to need to have many advisors. You're going to need to have input from many different locations. So you want to start as you build and continue your career. And as long as you're on this planet, you always want to be identifying new advisors and new people that can help you, give you different perspective, and take you to that next level. So my advisor said, the friend of the family, but became a trusted advisor, that until he passed away, we became really good friends, said you should major in computer science. So I took that advice. I went to New York Institute of Technology and I majored in computer science with a minor in business. And that brings up my next piece of advice to you. Everything is business. Everything in life is business. When you're going in, depending on your status, if you are dating or you are getting married, that's a business transaction. You don't tell my wife that, right? So some people might not like to hear that, but it is. When you're dating, what are you doing? You are doing sales and marketing, right? Especially now more than ever with dating sites. When you go in and put up a profile and you're putting up pictures and you're trying to get somebody to agree to go on a date with you, isn't that marketing? And then if you want to go in and convince somebody to marry you, isn't that sales, right? And then when you get married, isn't that a financial transaction that you're agreeing to share finances, right? Absolutely. So whether you like it or not, everything you do in life, from social to running businesses, to your career, to your hobbies, is all business. So always stay up to speed on business. I recommend that at a minimum, once a month, you read a business book. You're always learning new tactics and techniques about business, because especially as a chief information security officer in a business, you need to recognize that understanding and being able to think like a business person is critical. So the more business skills you have, the more you can market, and the more you sell, the more successful you will be. So I enroll in computer science with a minor in business, and I'm in my second semester, and I'm in programming classes. Now remember, this is in the mid 80s, when really computer science was electrical engineering with a few programming electives on it. It wasn't what it is today, right? It doesn't have all of the programming and designs and everything else. So I had to take Fortran and engineering courses and physics and calculus and all that fun stuff. And some of it, to be honest with you, wasn't so fun. So I remember sitting in class and I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this for a living. But I also know that school is different than real life. So I decided that I wanted to do an intern. I wanted to go in and get some experience. I wanted to see, what does a computer scientist really do? And that's my next piece of life advice to you. Always test your theories. Always go in and verify and validate. If you have a thought where you think something is good or you think something is bad, test, verify, and validate, because you never know. I've had good ideas that turn out to be really bad and bad ideas that turn out to be really good. So always go in and test out your theories and test out your hypothesis. And I was thinking about this for a while, and I remember clear as day because it was so life-changing. It was Thursday afternoon at 2:30, and I'm in my Fortran programming class. And something popped in my mind saying, go today. As soon as this class is over, go to the co-op office. Go to the co-op office on the other side of campus and talk to them and see what's going on. So I said, okay, I'm going to go today. And it was on the other side of campus. So it was probably maybe a half a mile walk, and I didn't have a car. And as I look outside, it starts raining and it starts pouring. Next piece of life advice. You're going to be tested in your life. You're going to be tested to see how strong your convictions are. And I will tell you this, the stronger the roadblocks, the more you need to execute, the more you need to go to the next level. So I could have very easily said, oh, it's raining. I'm going to go tomorrow. I'm going to go next week. I'm going to put it off. But something inside me said, I am going today. So I got my umbrella and I go off to campus, and I arrive there 15 minutes before they close. And I walk in and they say, oh, so you must have saw the messages. I said, what messages? They said, you don't know what's happening? I said, no idea. What are you talking about? They said, tomorrow, the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, is recruiting on campus. They recruit once every 2 years. 2 years, not 2 months, 2 years. And they're coming tomorrow, and we have 3 slots left. Do you want one of the slots? Sure, why not? I'll give it a shot, right? I'll go in and give experience. And I initially said to them, I haven't interviewed before, right? I worked at bagel stores and landscaping companies, right, to make money to pay for college, but I didn't really have like a real job and do a real interview. And I remember the lady looking at me going, the best way to get experience is to try and fail and learn and improve. And that's the next piece of life advice I want to give you. Always take action. You're never going to think you're prepared. There's always another book you can read. There's always another person you can talk to, but take action today. I could have said, I'm not ready or this or that, but I said, I'm going to go in and do it. So I show up the next day in my really cheesy brown suit. By the way, next piece of life advice, never buy a brown suit, right? Never, ever buy a brown suit. There's no reason, even if you lose a bet, where you should buy a brown suit. So don't buy a brown suit. But despite the brown suit, I went in and I was very authentic and genuine. I didn't know what to expect from an interview, but I was very honest, very sincere, and did my best to do the best performance and answer the questions that they had. Here's the next piece of life advice. Listen more than you speak and always ask questions. That was just one of the fundamental things that my dad always taught me. And that was one of the big pieces of feedback, because the fact that the CIA comes to a college campus, they also give the recruiters feedback on each candidate. And the feedback they gave on me was most applicants are nervous and they want to talk and tell them how awesome they are. And they don't listen to anything we're saying. And they end up over talking and saying things that contradict what we said. Eric, they said, he listened. And before he answered anything, he always asked 2 or 3 clarifying questions, and they really like that. And I will tell you, that skill serves me in the boardroom today. When I sit on boards, because cybersecurity is becoming very critical, and I brief executives, I talk the least amount in the room. And before I talk, I always ask 3 clarifying questions. But I will tell you this. When I open my mouth, everybody listens. When I open my mouth, everybody puts down their cell phone, because they know that I'm not somebody that just blah, 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 blah. If Eric is going to talk, it must be something important and valuable. That's the person you want to be. You don't want to be the person that talks 90%. You don't want to be the person that dominates and takes control of the meeting. You want to be the authority. And authorities ask more questions than they speak, and they don't speak unless they have something valuable to say. And that leads to one of my favorite quotes. Smart people know the right answer. Brilliant people ask the right question. And if you want to be a brilliant CISO, ask the right questions. So I get done with the interview and they give me a package, a big, thick envelope, and I walk out of the room. And I walk out of the room and I remember the 3 people from campus, the recruiters, they see me with the envelope and their eyes get real big and they're like, what did you do? And I'm like, I don't know. What did I do? Did I do something wrong? They're like, no, they only give applications out to 2 or 3 people. And so far, they've only given applications out to 1 other person today. And you're the second person. You must have done really, really good. And that does my next advice. You might not always think you did your best performance, but compared to others, if you're prepared and you do your work, you're going to outshine other people without realizing it. So always be prepared. Don't wait for an opportunity and then be prepared. Always be prepared, and the opportunities will show up. So then I've gone in and I fill out the application, and make a long story short, I get called down to Virginia to do my interview and my poly and all that fun stuff that's needed, and I get accepted into the CIA. Now, as an intern with the CIA, you have full clearances. So you have the same clearances as a full-time employee, but you're a free resource because you're covered from a different pot of money. So what that means is every department wants you because you don't count against their overhead. You're basically a free person that can work for them. So now when I go into the 4 or 5 offices that are interested, it's really a reverse interview. They're trying to sell me. They're trying to convince me on why I should work for them. So I went in and I talked to a networking group. I went and talked to a programming group. I went and talked to the Network Operations Center. And I talked to this little department, the Office of Security. And I went back and I talked to my advisors at school and some of the professors. And it almost seemed like everyone was saying networking is the future. Computers are going to be networked together. Networks are going to take over the world. Anybody that understands and knows networking is going to be able to have a great job and make a lot of money. You should go into the networking group. Now, this might sound a little contradictory to what I said earlier. It's good to have advice. It's good to ask questions, but ultimately follow your heart. Ultimately follow what your gift is. And in this case, something inside me said, I know that's a safe bet. I know networking is safe, and I know I'll always have a job. But cybersecurity, this sounds intriguing. And based on my own independent analysis, I felt that cybersecurity was the future. Because I'm thinking to myself, if everything's networked together and everything's accessible from anywhere around the world, and these systems aren't secure, isn't that going to be a problem? Isn't that going to be an issue? And isn't that something the world is really going to need? And I sort of felt like my mission was to really make cyberspace safe. I remember wrote down on a piece of paper, securing cyberspace during one of those interviews, and just sort of felt like that was my calling. So what you got to remember is advice is good, but don't let short-minded people that are trying to play it safe and protect you guide your future and guide your destiny. If there's something you want to do, like be a CISO or go to the next level, I know some CISOs that I coach become CEOs because that's their mission and purpose. Don't let anybody hold you back. Don't let people that are trying to protect you limit you from jumping and pursuing your dream. So then I go and work at the CIA, and I'm doing the security. And another life-changing event for me is, you might have seen it in some of the Tom Clancy movies that feature the CIA in Langley, Virginia. They have a bubble. It's an auditorium, but it looks like a half wall rising out of the ground. And it's their big auditorium where they have briefings and seminars and meetings. And there was an all-hands meeting for my directorate in that bubble. So thousands of people packed in, standing room only. And because I'm a lonely GS employee, I'm in the back of the room. And they're talking about the future of communication and the future of technology, the internet. And they're describing these different internet-based systems and internet communication. And I raised my hand because I had a question. Now, once again, I was young, dumb, and naive, and I didn't know you're not supposed to ask questions, right? I didn't know the rules, right? And my boss in the front of the room just happened to look back, and she sees that I'm raising my hand, and she starts going like this. put your hand down, like that. I thought she was waving to me. So I'm waving back and I kept my hand up. And they eventually call on me and you just see her go like this. So next piece of advice. When it's appropriate and respectful, it's okay to break the rules. It's okay to swim upstream and not do what everyone else is doing. No one else in that auditorium was asking questions, but that didn't mean that I couldn't. We were allowed to ask questions. I wasn't violating any rules. It wasn't like you're not allowed to ask questions. It was just no one else was doing it. So don't be afraid to swim upstream and be different than everyone else. What I tell my kids all the time, if people aren't looking at you, pointing at you and laughing at you, you're doing it wrong because you're blending in with the crowd, and that's not what leaders do. That's not what people do. Do you realize people laughed at Elon Musk? People laughed at Bill Gates. People laughed at Steve Jobs in his parents' garage. Who's laughing today? Right? They got the last laugh. So don't be afraid to swim upstream and do what others are not doing. And then I asked a question, back to my theme of always ask questions that change my career. And I asked a simple question. I said, we're deploying systems on the internet. How do we know they are secure? And that was the question. Short, sweet, simple. That's my next piece of advice. And this is probably one of the critical pieces of advice to be an effective CISO. Learn to ask clear, articulate questions. I sit in board meetings and people ask questions, and after 3 minutes of them trying to get the question out, I'm like, I have no idea what you're asking, right? Let alone no one's following it, and half the people are on their cell phone sleeping. If you can't get the question out in 10 words or less, reframe it. Now, yes, there's always exceptions to the rule, but most really good questions are ones that are very articulate and you can get out in a short number of words. And I remember after I asked the question, how do we know these systems are secure? They all sort of looked at each other and they're like, and they came back and said, Eric, thank you so much for volunteering to solve that problem for us. And I'm like, I wasn't volunteering to solve the problem. I was just asking a question. But I then got tasked, and I started off as a team of one that was responsible for figuring out how to protect, secure, and lock down our applications. By the time I left 6 years later, I built a team of over 80 people doing this. So don't shy away from small beginnings. And it turns out, as you all know, there is no way to prove a system is secure. You can only prove a system is not secure by trying to break in. So essentially, I was a professional hacker for the CIA for 8 years, and I learned just about everything you can learn at the time of how the offense works, how they operate, how to break into systems, and how to understand those exposures and vulnerabilities. So that's going to be my next piece of advice. To be a really good CISO, which is a defensive position, you must understand and think like the offense. If you don't know how the offense works, if you don't know how the offense operates, you're going to be fixing good problems, but you're not going to be fixing the problems that really matter. And not trying to pick on anybody in any way, shape, or form, but this is the problem I have when companies have CISOs that came from other disciplines or other areas that don't have any background in security. They don't understand the adversary. And if you don't understand the adversary, if you don't know how the opposing players are operating and running, you're going to have a very hard time playing a game. You could be the smartest person on the planet, but if you don't know the rules of chess and you try to sit down even with a junior chess player, you're going to get your butt kicked because you don't know the game and you don't know how the game works and how the game is played. And that's going to be my next piece of advice. Everything is a game. Life is a game. Business is a game. Your career is a game. I won't go relationships are a game. I'm probably already in trouble on that front. I'll leave that one out. But the point is everything's a game. And the people that win games are the ones that understand the game and they think 10 moves ahead. If you look at the really good chess players, they can look at you and say, I'm going to win in 9 moves. I'm going to win in 7 moves, because they understand the game so much and they're in such control that regardless of what you do, they have you exactly where they want you. They have you set up. And no matter what happens, they're going to win in 7 moves. That's how you want to play the game of security. Cybersecurity is a game. And if you don't understand the offense and know how they work and how they operate, where essentially they try to target either a server or a user and exploit a weakness or a vulnerability. So in other episodes, we'll talk about CISO strategies and how they work and operate, like asset inventory and configuration management. The lesson I want you to get from this episode is it is a game. And if you don't understand the offense and know how the offense works and operates, you're not going to be successful. So then after the CIA, I'll be honest with you, I got a little bored, because you can always break into a system. There's always a way to break into a system. There's always a weakness, a vulnerability, and exploitation. So it wasn't fun anymore, because we all know that for the offense to break into a system, they only have to find one vulnerability. And for the defense to defend themselves, you have to find all the vulnerabilities. So cyber defense is much harder. And that's why I spent the last 20 plus years on the defensive side, being a CISO, protecting, securing, and locking down organizations. Next piece of advice. When I got my first job as a CISO at a telecommunications company, I remember the executive stating, okay, Eric, we're never going to have a breach. We're going to be secure, protected, locked down, and never have a breach. And I immediately said, sir, that's not how we're going to keep score. I said, if that's how you're going to keep score, then I'm not the right person for the job. Because as long as you have functionality, you don't have 100% security. 100% security means zero functionality. So as soon as you add functionality in place, there'll always be vulnerabilities. I said, what I can guarantee for you is that we will catch all attacks when they're small, when they're contained, and have minimal damage to the organization. And I said, my motto is, may all your breaches be minor. And they understood that and they accepted it. So next thing, to be a successful CISO, make sure you're playing on the same scoreboard as the executives. And I'll tell you, many don't. And this is easy. What is the number one thing that happens when a company has a breach? When a company has a breach, the number one thing that happens is they fire the CISO. What does that tell you? That tells you that their scoreboard was, we should never have a breach. And if we did have a breach, that means the CISO didn't do their job. If that's how you're keeping score, you're going to have a very successful but a very high turnover career. You're going to work at a lot of places. Right? I'd prefer you to leave a company when you want to, not when the adversary decides that you should leave. So it's important to always make sure you clearly communicate and you are articulate in how you communicate with others. And that's how I want to finish up this episode, in terms of giving you a little background of my experience, where I came from and where I started, and giving you some key pieces of advice that will make you successful as a CISO. And that is, always over communicate. In my opinion, the number one reason why businesses get broken into, relationships fall apart, or business deals don't work out is because of a lack of or poor communication. One side thought A, the other side thought B, and nobody communicated enough to recognize that they weren't connected in their communication. So one of the things I recommend as a CISO is always over communicate. Always repeat back and say, okay, so Mr. or Mrs. CEO, I know we just talked about our metrics, but I just want to be crystal clear that we agreed that breaches are okay, but we're going to only have minor breaches, which is defined as X, Y, and Z. Is that correct? And then I always follow up with written communication to make sure that we are on the same side. If you're going to be a chief information security officer, you need to recognize that you are a business person, and ultimately your role is to keep the business safe and operating and successful. And one of my other big rules of being a CISO is if security negatively impacts the business, security is wrong. And I know this is a hard one for techie people because they're going to think that, oh, no. If we're making the business secure, we're always right. But if you negatively impact the business or cost the business money, you're always going to be wrong, regardless of the security. So remember that you are a business person. Always communicate clearly and concisely. And remember, it's not the quantity of the communication, but the quality of the communication. So in any meeting or any situation, listen more than you speak. And before you speak, always ask 2 to 3 clarifying questions so you can go in and make sure you really understand what they're looking for, and then give very clear, articulate answers to make sure you're always providing value in everything that you do. And most importantly, looking at some of the softer side, it's good to have advisors. It's good to get advice. But remember, many people that care about you want you to play it safe. They want you to go in and have a comfortable job. I will tell you, when I decided to leave the government, my parents and many of my advisors were very mad at me. Because guess what? The government is a comfortable job. Unless you really screw up, you really can't get fired, you really don't get laid off, right? And I have a very consistent paycheck, and then I get a pension after 25 years of working for them, which means I'm fairly safe for retirement. So from a safety perspective, it was a good job. So my family was trying to keep me safe. However, that wasn't my purpose. My purpose, remember, passion, you might have many of them. Passion are things that you enjoy to do. Purpose is your reason for being on this planet. And I knew that my purpose was to make cyberspace a safe place to live, work, and raise a family. And I could only fulfill that purpose by jumping. And the way that I jumped is by leaving the government, starting my companies, and living my dream. So ultimately, while being passionate about what you do is important, sit down and spend a few minutes on what is your purpose in life, what is your reason for being here, write it down, write down your goals, and let nothing get in your way. I hope you found some value out of this episode of Life of a CISO. You got some skills, some life advice, some ways of learning from my experience so you don't have to make the same mistakes I did. And by applying those, you will be a very successful CISO. You will be very effective, and everybody will want you to work at their organization. Once again, this is Dr. Eric Cole from Secure Anchor Consulting. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Life of a CISO. If you need more information, please visit www.secure-anchor.com. Thank you so much, and I'll see you on the next episode.